the three traditional paths that a lot of people take when they start looking at kind of what life looks like after you graduate. We are going to look at a couple options, but we're also going to be looking at a lot of different resources. So the big thing is, and let me just go ahead and share my screen. The big thing is to start to consider what and kind of how you want to interact with your future, right? And so, of course, right now we're all in this weird space of okay, it's all on pause. What do we do? What's it even called? And so what I always like to think about is that I don't like to consider it a gap year because you're not really not doing something. There's not this like hole, but instead to think of it as an experience year. And in a lot of ways, there are three kind of paths that students will take when they are considering or contemplating their future once they graduate with their bachelor's. And the first one is your normal kind of, I guess you'd say, academic route, which is, you know, going into graduate or professional study. And graduate or professional study often focuses on kind of continuing the training that you started here at Eckerd. So a lot of students will continue on with their course of study or their course of focus. They will kind of develop the skills that they need to be in their field, particularly for professionals, right? If you're thinking med school, dental school, pre-vet, you know, or not pre-vet, actually veterinary medicine, or if you're thinking MBA or like law school, JD, or if you're considering or contemplating like an accounting degree, these are all going to be degrees that you need to continue in your profession. And those paths are pretty direct in a sense. And a large portion, not all, but a large portion of our students who do decide to take that professional route often decide fairly early in their senior year to do it, and some of them are even making that decision in the last part of their junior year. And so that's kind of they'll often head right into that path. I will say that lately we have had a number of our students who have been very interested in medicine that have taken a year or two to kind of have some experiences before they went into med school. Now, some of those students have taken that opportunity to do masters in a field they want to do study in. Some have done international service or teaching. Some have even done, you know, kind of domestic work, work within a facility or even in a lab. Now, that's perfectly fine. You know, there isn't a perfect time frame for any of this, but professional study often happens a little more kind of in lockstep versus just kind of a traditional kind of graduate path, a research-oriented or academic-oriented path. There are, of course, going to be areas we'll talk about tonight that differentiate these two, and timelines are always going to be something that everyone's concerned about. The second thing that a lot of our students and graduates do is they take short-term kind of book-ended experiences. In the sciences, a lot of these are referred to as post-baccalaureate. In other fields, they're kind of entry-level or they're fellowships or they're placements. These always have a 1 to 2 year bookend, right? So there's a beginning and an end. And what this really is meant to do is to give you a little more experience and exposure in a field, but it's meant to get you to that next stage, whether that next stage is graduate or professional study, whether it's continuing education in that case, or whether it's getting you into a preparation for another position. I like to think of these kind of like externships or things that occur that build on what you've done, but don't yet push you into the job world, right? There is also short-term experience that's not always what I would consider professional. It doesn't mean that you're not doing things in your field, but it often means that you're doing things that may be outside. Peace Corps is one of those experiences that kind of both exist professionally, but also in a service and also in your area of study. But there are other fellowships and opportunities that are out there too. And in that case, what I often like to tell students is that these are three paths that a lot of our students take. There is always the fourth path, which is going to be the jobby job or the job, which is a perfectly good path to take too. And I would recommend highly that you speak with our career services about kind of planning those kind of aspects out too. I mean, right now, as you all know, we're in the, I like to call it the great pause. In the sense that things are not operating in the same way that they traditionally operate. And so thinking about actual job placement would be probably really, it would be a very helpful move to kind of pull in some of our career services, pull in your mentors, of course, and kind of really kind of take that to heart. One of the things I always like to just bring up is that graduate school is not a fix-all. It is not a space that you jump into because you're like, oh gosh, I just don't want to go out into the world again right now, and I'm really happy here, and this is my place. But instead, graduate school is where you kind of get to encounter, for lack of a better term, your tribe, the people that you share common thoughts, practices, deeds, experiences, and kind of a lexicon of sorts, right? And what this means is that these are going to be the individuals and the communities that you're going to encounter professionally for probably a good portion of your working life, right? So it doesn't mean that when you go into graduate school, that's all you're ever going to do for the rest of your life. But these are the people that you want to kind of work with and around. These are, in a sense, individuals that are in your fields of study, but also doing things beyond that. I always tell students when they're thinking about graduate school to really cast a wide net and to use your exploration time wisely. A lot of times students will be debating, do I want a master's? Do I need a terminal degree like an MBA or an MFA? Or do I need a PhD or a doctoral degree? What do I need, right? What are these different categories? And every field is different, right? So some programs you have to have the master's in order to get the PhD. Some programs it doesn't matter, right? So in a sense, you can do either depending on what you want your end game to be. And there are some masters that are completely terminal. That means they don't have a PhD beyond them, right? They don't have more advanced study. When you're looking at masters, particularly domestic, like US, you're looking at about 18 months to 2 years for completion. And for a PhD, you're looking at about 5 to 7 years. Now, a lot of times students are like, well, I don't even know what schools are, what there are, as far as like, where do I go? Like who's doing what I want to do? And there are some tips and suggestions I have for that. The first one I would recommend is just if you go into my LibGuide, let me go to this one. Sorry. On my LibGuide, which is libguides.eckerd.edu/cat, you'll kind of land on this landing page. And if you go to graduate school research in the center, there's actually an area right here in the middle called the Testing and Education Reference Center. Now, within this area, what you're going to find is a lot of information. FYI, because we're all off campus, you'll probably have to go up and, just like you would do if you were looking in the library, and kind of pull in the login information and all of those parameters. And if you have problems doing that, let me know. Professor Johnson and the librarian staff are just fantastic at getting everybody in here. The reason I pull this up is because this is a service that Eckerd pays for and supports for their students, and it has a great section under grad school. You will see a GMAT, GRE, LSAT, and MCAT. These are practice tests. There's 3 practice tests for all of these, except for the MCAT, which is there's only 1, but they do have lots of practice tests, like portions of the test to take. We'll talk about that in more detail here in a little bit, but there's a lot of good stuff under this grad school link. One of the best places to kind of go to start thinking about like, where should I go? What programs are out there is under the graduate school and scholarship search. And if you go in here, what you're going to find is kind of a breakdown. And if you know kind of like what you're looking for, if you're looking more MBA or, in some ways, there's a lot of different tabs here. But I just say start with the graduate school search. Um, this will take you into an area. And if you've never been in here, you will have to register your account. It's like I said, it's fairly simple, but they will need to do it. Just use your Eckerd email credentials and things along those lines, and you'll get set up, no problem. And then the key is you can go in here and say, well, I'm really interested in the environment. I want to kind of explore some different, areas of, kind of environmental management and policy, but I'm not quite sure what I want to do. And so you can select from the school subject area and the program, and then you can just do undecided. And that means it could be any of the PhD, MAs, any of those things that you're kind of exploring, and then you can just hit law locations. When you hit the See My Results page, it's going to kind of pull up kind of a smattering of different schools from different areas and different types of experiences. The key to kind of looking at these and kind of developing a sense of perspective on them is to think about where and what you might want to do. You can see there's 335 different schools that have environmental management and policy graduate programs. And you can look in and say, well, I'm kind of interested in Boston, right? Who knows? And you can kind of see under the admissions tab, you can see what they require, a GRE, what the fall admission is, application fee. And then, of course, I always tell students, I'm like, look at the statistics, like how old are the students? If you see that they're in their 30s, then this means they probably want you to have some experience before you come in. But if it's like this one, which is 24, this is probably a pretty, like, students are coming from a bachelor's, probably with 1 or 2 years, and then coming into a program. They accept 77%, or they did in this cycle. You can also look under financial aid, which I definitely would recommend, because this will let you know how many students receive support from the school. And you want to see about assistantships, research, teaching, or graduate. And you want to know what kind of programs they're funding. And so this will let you know the degree requirements is they want you to have a foreign language and a thesis or a capstone. And by taking a look at this, you can start to create your own matrix and start to go like, okay, so this is what I'm interested in. And then like, let's look at the University of Minnesota. Have no idea about this program, but let's take a look at admissions. We can see their average age is 26. They do also GRE. And then if you look under the financial aid package, you can see here it's a little more detailed. They had 6 students who received support that had tuition reimbursements, so full tuition reimbursements. They had career-related internships, healthcare benefits, tuition waivers, full and partial. And so you're starting to see this. Now, the reason I bring this up as an important part of what you're thinking about when you're considering graduate school is that graduate school is going to provide, in some cases, an amount of funding. And when you start thinking about what are some questions that I'm looking at, of course, you want to think about, do I want which graduate degree, and or do I just want a graduate certificate? Graduate certificates are usually only 3 to 5 graduate classes, and they could count towards a master's at some point or a PhD, but they're just to give you a kind of a little more of a credential. So of course you want to think MA, PhD, graduate certificate, but you also really want to think about funded versus non-funded programs. And that's where I say, go to the Testing and Education Reference Center. This is going to be key to kind of getting yourself kind of comfortable with what's going on, what type of programs, who's getting funded, who's not getting funded. And there are going to be shades of difference between public and private, between research one and more teaching centered or more service oriented educational kind of venues. So you really need to educate yourself on this. In some ways, there's a lot of different information that you can find, in different overviews. There's also always going to be some different, like reports and things that you can pull into. Um, I think that when you start thinking about graduate school, the big concern in everybody's head is not going into a tremendous amount of debt. And that's where you really want to start, figuring out which programs you're interested in, where they're located, what kind of funding they have. And then you also want to start investigating other opportunities tied to schools and tied to disciplines. And this is going to help you. But as you can hear in my voice right now, it's a lot of research, right? And so the benefit of this summer and the great pause is that you can probably do a fair amount of that research, right? But you can also see that trying to do that and go through a normal senior year is going to be a little bit hard. So you can see why certain and a large portion of our students kind of go, okay, I'm going to do this when I graduate, right? I'm going to get some experience, but I'm also going to take that time to work on figuring out what I'm interested in. I also highly recommend reaching out to, and the top three on my list are always, number one, your mentor or mentors in your field. Talk to your professors, ask them where they went to school, who did they study with, what kind of funding did they receive. These are going to be things that are going to start to become part of what you're interested in. And depending on where you want to go, they may be able to help connect you with ongoing research too. I think so. Number one, your mentors, your professors, the people you connect with. The second layer are the people in your field doing the research. And for that, I say you need to kind of be involved with your discipline. So look at, like, for instance, I'm just going to pull up environmental studies here. Look at the different national and global organizations that are in your field. For instance, reach out to the American Academy of Environmental Engineers. See who's doing the work in their field. What are they saying? Where did they study? And there's so many different, subsets of professional societies and organizations that you can kind of pull in. And you just need to know where your community is. So dealing with the people that are doing the work in your field through associations and societies is number one. Or not number one, it's number two, but that's the first kind of area of connecting out. That means maybe going to conferences, reading journals, seeing what that looks like, right? And that means also reaching out to them, which scares people. Like, it scared me when I was an undergrad. Like, I didn't want to read an article and then reach out to the professor who wrote it. Like, they would mock me. Like, what if I asked a question that wasn't like erudite and like on target, right? And then I kind of had a mentor that said, listen, they don't judge you any more than they judge themselves. And so reach out, see if they're looking, give them some insight, ask them a question about their research, let them know you're interested. Mentors, professors, researchers love to talk about what they're doing. So let them do that. And I think one of the best kind of, I guess you'd say, overviews that I've seen in a long time was actually a couple years ago on a blog I followed called The Contemplative Mammoth. It's an Ice Age ecologist, but she wrote this really profound kind of way of thinking about like reaching out, and it kind of goes through like what you should be doing, and it talks about kind of what your CV should look like and all this stuff that you're like, oh, I don't know about. But then it gives a really good overview. And it talks a little bit about like how to do this. The thing I love more than anything is that this blog, Jacqueline Gill, is still answering questions. Like, this came through in January. She's still responding. She's still giving insights. And now, I don't think we're all in Ice Age ecology, but this is good stuff regardless of where you are, right? So number one, talk to the people you know. Number two, start talking to the people you should know. And the last one is start looking at those types of communities at those graduate schools. Go just into basically Google and just type in graduate student associations. Whoops, I misspelled associations. And then you can put in something, since we're on the environmental, I'm just going to put environmental, and I'm just going to put university. I'm just going to leave it really broad. Graduate Student Association's Environmental University. So you can see here, there's at UW has a student group. Here, one here looks like the School of Aquatic and Fishery at UW. Here's a graduate student organization for environment. So now, why do I want you to look at these? Because if you go into them, what you're going to find out is what people are doing in that field that are graduate students at this institution. And you're going to see like, oh, wait a minute, they've got research and travel grants. What does that look like if I was a student there? What could I apply for, right? You know, what, you know, kind of contacts do they have? You know, what kind of mentoring do they do? And so this, I think, is something that gives you a sense of kind of comfort with knowing where you're going. It was something that I did when I first started looking at like grad schools, because I wanted to know where I was going, right? And how happy and content and focused the community I was going to be encountering was. Now, you take it with a grain of salt. You know, sometimes you're going to see different media posts that are going to say different things, but I think overall you can start to know, you know, if you should go there or not, right? And I think that those three areas will start to help you. Now, this takes time. You can't do this like, I'm going to pick out grad schools and everything this weekend, like Saturday and Sunday, get it done, put it down to bed. No, you're going to need to do this. Like a lot of the students I work with are doing it, like giving themselves like an hour a week, right? And they're just calling it graduate school or professional school or med school, whatever they're doing. And they're just kind of focusing on finding the program. And it takes a little bit of time, right? You may discover a space or a place that you enjoy early on, but most students will look at between 20 and 25 graduate kind of type programs. And they'll usually end up applying, depending, every discipline's a little bit different, but usually on average between 6 to 8, sometimes a little bit more if they feel the need to, but you know, sometimes a little fewer, but usually you kind of gel down in that case, you know. So that's kind of what you're looking at, you know, in many ways when you're thinking graduate school. Now, a professional degree, well, that's just going to be so different in so many ways, because those are very specific, they're very targeted, and there's a real world application that comes in a different way than it does in just graduate school. You know, and most of the professional degrees do have not only a kind of a residency or an experience based at the end, they also require you to pass a certification test or a specific type. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. 1 second. They ask you to kind of very specifically work on something, right? And so that you have to pass it. So it's not just, you know, 4 years of education and you're done. There's usually some stair steps. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to professional degrees, it's all about kind of preparation before you put in the application. So whether it's med school or veterinarian, or whether it's pharmaceutical or law, you really kind of want to put in a lot of kind of, I guess you'd say, groundwork in before you put the application in a different way than grad programs. Grad programs, in a way, you're looking out and figuring out if you fit in, where professional degrees, you're looking in to see whether you can go out, right? You're looking to see how much you fit in with the program, not so much how the community fits in with you, which is more graduate school, right? We have a pre-health committee. I'm on it with a number of other excellent professionals who are happy to look at any of your pre-health stuff. Allison Quattrini and Robert Wigton do a lot with our law and kind of the kind of public service path. We have a large number of really good people that can kind of help you to kind of start to think about what it means to apply for these. But these are in a different realm, in a sense. So finding programs that you're interested in kind of focus on a little bit of a different question set than the graduate programs. Most of it focuses on, your score, because a lot of these are score driven. For instance, let me just take a moment and I'm just going to show you. Um, the American Association of Medical Colleges, the AAMC, has a really good overview of data. And every year they put it out and it explains to you in some ways what's going on based on the institution and who they've accepted. And you'll see here, like this breakdown shows like with schools in Alabama, how many applications, in-state, out-state, by state, by sex, and by state. But you'll also see here, if you go down here by MCAT scores and GPAs. And so when I say that it's driven by kind of like how you fit into somewhere, it really is about that like, did you get the 510, right? The total MCAT was 504 in 2017. It's 505 and now 506 in 2019 to 2020. So if you got like a 490, then you may not fit this. So then we have to find schools that maybe look at, okay, your GPA. And so it's that kind of calculus in that sense. Veterinarian medicine is even more fine-tuned because there's only at any time 26 to 32 programs in the US that offer veterinarian degrees, veterinary medical degrees. And so that's a really weird pool. But this is why I think in so many ways, when you start considering what a professional degree looks like, you really need to kind of give yourself time to prepare your candidacy, your scores, and to do a little bit of research about those institutions. Also, all of them usually require some kind of experience. So shadowing, volunteering, some type of engagement. And normally what I will tell, students when they're at the crossroads, like recently I spoke with a graduate, Madison, she graduated last year. Excellent student, interested in veterinarian medicine, but ended up that she's really actually more interested in actual kind of more medical applications than just being a vet. And so she's really right now debating whether she does medical, kind of go into MD, or if she goes into like a master's of medical science, because she's not quite sure. And so right now we're working together to explore like what are those differences. Like if you got a master's in medical science or a master's in public health, how does that maybe open up a different type of door or community than getting like going into med school? And so that first question is always, well, what degree is it, right? And this in a different way, but you have to explore it to kind of find it. The Testing and Education Reference Center is fantastic. And I'm just telling you now, bookmark it, just go to it. It's a great resource. It's password protected. The information's solid. It definitely is something to put in your list that Eckerd provides for you guys. And how do you know if you should go? I would like to say there's a magical kind of like feeling that you get, and you just know, and you hear like voices on everyone singing, there's birds, but no. How do you know if you should go? Well, I think if you speak with your mentors and you speak with people in the field and they're like, hey, you're asking really good questions about this subject and this material, and you would be a great candidate for the program, then yes. I think you should go too if you still have more questions. I think you should go if you know that you can't perform what you want to perform by not going. For instance, myself, I knew that I couldn't be involved in collegiate teaching without a PhD. I was interested in being involved in academic work, and it kind of propelled me into this. Now, would I say that I'm in the traditional literature PhD route? No, I am in a very hybrid position, but my skill set, comes from the experience I had in grad school. And so I could not be here without this. And so I think you have to think about, well, what are some of the places you want to be? And what do you need to get into those spaces? And remember, as I say a lot, got 40 to 60 years of stuff that you're going to be doing. You don't need to cram everything in this very beginning spot. You can give yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of space. Um, now, so we'll kind of hold on graduate school and professional, and we'll kind of think, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll kind of do something a bit more professional, but kind of in the short term. And for this, I often kind of push students to think about motivation. Um, is it because you have, you've thought about your future goals, you think this will fit in, it's going to be an experience that will provide you a certain amount of experience and satisfaction. So number one, motivation. What is it? Why do you want to do this, right? The second thing, and I think a lot of students don't do this when they first start this thought process, is they don't define their goals. Like, if you just want to go and work through a public service fellowship like Pulse Pittsburgh, and you want to go to Pittsburgh for a year, and you're going to be working with a group of community organizers, you need to know like why you want to go there, right? Are you interested in expanding a skill set of working with community organization? Are you more interested in thinking about like living in a different space or a different culture? A lot of times when students think about like, well, I think that I want to apply for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is basically a year-long professional short-term placement with a think tank with Carnegie. And they're like, well, I'm interested in clarifying my interests, right? And kind of having this experience. And so you have to really define those goals. And those goals may be different for each short-term opportunity you're looking at. And that's why I think those opportunities, you need to look at more than just one. You want to have a few options because this planning ahead allows you to really work towards those firm applications or fellowships. It gives you time to look at, if you're thinking international, it gives you time to really look at those experiences. And for that, I do want to kind of step out and just kind of show you a few kind of, I guess you'd say, resources that are good to look at. Every discipline has a different way of thinking about post-bachelor's work, right? And so if you look at like a lot of public service or I guess you'd say even international programming, you're going to find different types of fellowships. I mentioned Pulse Pittsburgh, and you can see here it's working at a nonprofit. It's only for a year. So this is a post-baccalaureate, truly. It's a year, right? The same with Challenge Detroit or Cleveland Foundation or Work for First. These are going to be time spent on task with an organization that are good. It's going to give you an education, but it's going to give you a different type of experiences. Now they're calling these fellowships, so you won't hear the post-bac that you might hear in other terms. You may also hear different types of programs that will be popping up. Now, there's always going to be, and one of the things to think about is these opportunities don't just exist in the U.S. bubble. This is a list of some great opportunities that a school in Canada put together that actually have some different types of organizations that work in a variety of different locations that have a lot of like short-term, really targeted ways of engaging different communities in different sectors. And so things along this line are going to be truly experience-based. But it's going to take a while. Sometimes it takes a while to find these, right? So my advice is always to start out with your discipline and figure out like, well, what is my area of interest and what is kind of there. A lot of our students, of course, marine science. So you will see down here that there's, and I'm sorry that they're kind of there's overlap here, but there's a lot of different kind of postdoc fellowships, funding programs that also are kind of post PhD even, but you'll see here that a lot of these are going to be programs that are going to do different types of post baccalaureate. I always recommend also thinking about different job databases and different listservs to join. That's another way to find out how they're calling, these kind of opportunities. Every field is going to be slightly different, and what and how they consider it. For instance, let's say you're very interested in the study of Japanese culture, language, etc. They have a number of different field service experiences. So the field service is going to be a little bit different than a research fellowship. There's also different types of internships where you will work with communication, or you would work with a 2 month here, like this one here is a 2 month internship that specifically focuses on professional development. And so these are things that you can really pull in. I also have included on this page, let me get out of here and go there. I've also included a great resource that I'm actually going to spend some time with next Tuesday, which is Yale's. They put together a really short-term position search engine, which I have found to be really helpful for the I don't want to say non-science, because they do have health research and environmental programs, but this has been a little bit broader. And so you could search for something like, if you were interested in public health, it allows you to search for all of these kind of postgraduate placements, so post-bachelor's placements. Now, some of these are not just in the US, like here is for service in India. This one here is a Adelaide's, it's a public health program looking at different types of policy. So you can kind of start to see like what Concern America is, Emerson National Hunger Fellowships, the Global Health Corps. So this is just public health. I think the other thing you can look at too is like, if you are thinking, I might just want to look into I guess you'd say education, right? I'm thinking about, like maybe this is something I want to go into. We don't have education at Eckerd, but this is different fellowship programs. The AmeriCorps program, which many of you know about. Here's a program that places graduates in disadvantaged areas of Haiti. So very different experiences, right? And in so many ways, when you're considering what those experiences look like, you can really consider like a lot of different options. The key is that you can start looking. Oh, I also just wanted to bring up, like, there's even ones that kind of focus on different specific organizations and areas, like ORISE, which everyone's like, well, how is ORISE? Well, what ORISE is it's basically an asset that focuses on science and research that the government put out. They actually have a lot of really good internships, fellowships, and different programs. They do it for recent grad, they do undergrads, they do different scholarships, they do different STEM scholarships. And you can kind of see here that a lot of the programs are in different, like a lot with the DOE, the DOT. So a lot of them are government oriented. A lot of them, like here's Department of Agriculture, which like, hey, right? Oh, here's CDC. Wow, bioinformatics. Let's just look at it. I just feel like I need to look at it in this day and age. And you can kind of see that there's a whole overview of this one here is the CDC. It's a fellowship, to train. You must be a recent graduate, bachelor's degree or higher. And it says, fields including bioinformatics, biostatistics, biology, toxicology, epidemiology, stats, engineering, chemistry. And then it explains like what that looks like, right? And the placement is going to be, the desired start date is, of course, May 21st. It's full time and it is monthly stipend. So like these are things that I would recommend that you can start looking at. And in some ways you may look at it and be like, I don't like a post-bachelor opportunity here in foreign animal diseases. I'm pretty sure that this is really interesting. Maybe kind of what we're doing right now with the whole COVID thing. But so they're looking for requires travel to. You must have a bachelor's degree in these areas, some skills here, you know, and so, hey, if you're interested in this, then this is something that you can start thinking ahead. The key is that these are short-term placements. They're not long-term jobs. You need to start thinking about, like, is this something I want to do? And think about it in the terms of, I want to kind of have an experience that's related to my professional and my future goals. But it doesn't have to just be narrow. And that's kind of that second area of like, what am I thinking? And then the third area that I tell students to look into is just like look outside and think about like what's an experience that you could have that is completely, I don't want to say divorced, but just not as connected and may get you internationally outside your comfort zone. And those are mostly in that teaching and experience area. We talked a lot on Tuesday in the prior session about the Fulbright and the various different programs it has. The ETA program, which we did spend some time talking about, is usually an 8 to 12-month placement where you go into another country and you teach English language, but you're also a cultural ambassador. You can teach in a variety of different age groups and academic levels. We've had graduates who have taught at other universities, which is always interesting to just graduate with your bachelor's and be teaching, other students that are in your peer group. We've had students that have gone and taught, in elementary or even primary, or secondary types of environments. And so it's a far reaching. You can only apply to one country at a time. So you do want to kind of think about, I have that consult the table. Let me just fix that. I do want to just kind of also recommend that when you do look at kind of the Fulbright, that you think in terms of what kind of experience and placement you want to have, because you do want to make the argument not just for I want to get anywhere and everywhere, but that you want to make the argument that, hey, I want to go to Taiwan. I want to teach English. There's 145 different placements there, and I really want to think about, because I'm going to be in an elementary school or a high school, what I want to do there and what my service project could look like. A lot of places will have you do service, and that I think is an interesting component, is to think about what those places or spaces look like and how you might want to get invested with them. It is a longer placement, and so a lot of times students will think, well, I'm kind of interested in looking at going into another place and getting some experience, but I'm not really wanting to do like a full 10 months. And that's when I recommend the CLS. The Critical Language Scholarship is a great program. You can apply, that you can apply right after graduation. You can apply as a senior. You can apply during your time. You can apply as a grad student. I mean, there's so many times you can apply for this. It's only 8 weeks. You can go into a number of different countries and spaces, and really think about kind of immersing yourself. No, you're not going to exit speaking perfect, Urdu, but you're going to get a good snapshot into it. And it's a really short and engaged program. Slightly longer, but also still very meaningful, is the Peace Corps. We have the Eckerd College Peace Corps Prep Program, which has been really successful. But even before that, we always had a strong showing of Peace Corps volunteers coming from Eckerd. We are currently we're in the nation's top producing small liberal arts colleges for Peace Corps. And I'll say why I think it is because our students, when they graduate, are like, nope, I'm not ready to kind of head down this path yet, but I want to have an experience and I want to try to develop myself, and I want to, do something beyond just, the norm. And while Peace Corps does not have a time limit, right? A couple years ago, they accepted someone who was 82 years old. So you can go into Peace Corps at any point. Believe me, I've thought about it at times, because it is something that 27 months, 3 months of training, 24 months of placement, and you are literally working side by side with local leaders in a variety of different ways and different capacities. We have a really large percentage of Peace Corps um, return volunteers that are also on our staff that are also great resources to talk about this program. The Peace Corps has a lot of different benefits too. The benefits range in sense from the financial benefits, right? They do pay you. They also provide you with usually a $10,000 returned kind of transition fund that they provide for you. Um, but what I really like about it is the graduate school benefits, because oftentimes, and you'll hear this from a lot of our return volunteers, they go, they do their service, they get really on fire about a topic, right? So if they're doing community economic development and they work with a group of individuals in a community and they find out the power of microloans, and they like come back and they're like, I need to go, I need to figure out how finance works because I want to do something. And at that point, I will often talk to them about like, okay, so where can we get this? Is this can you do it through apprenticeship? Do you need a degree? What do we need? And what has been coming up lately has been the power of the Coverdale. The Coverdale is basically a graduate fellowship that will pay for a portion of your graduate school, including, and this is where it always gets me, law, because there's very few law schools that give you any type of fellowship. And this is College of William and Mary. And this one's an MBA, so not only law, but most masters you pay out the teeth for. Drexel in Philadelphia, a law degree for 34,000. Elon 78, which is really great for law school. Loyola, awesome law school in Chicago, 17,000. And so you can here like. So this is a master's of public service, which is connected to law, but not quite law, for 68. And so while it's not these, like I said, law is something that definitely comes up, but the same with like nursing and medicine. Like, let's say you are very interested in going into to kind of becoming a medical professional. John Hopkins, Masters of Science, a Doctor of Nursing, Master of Public Health. These are all going to be in a way, this is clinical nursing, School of Nursing, things like this that are super, in a sense, skill based, but you don't find a lot of support for them. And so I don't want to like sell the Peace Corps in a sense, because I think you got to want to do it. But there's some really good things for you to look at and for you to think about as you kind of go forward. And like I said, there's no end date on it, so you can apply for the Peace Corps at any point. I went ahead and I showed that resource. I will kind of I'll be sharing it and kind of putting it out there because I think it's really helpful to kind of start to see, like if you are wanting to look in here, that there's right here. There's some post-baccalaureates, there's some different fellowships, different, like the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. We have students that are applying for that right now. There's just some things in here that are really helpful. And I always like to kind of bring that, to mind, is that these are three kind of general paths with some specifics in them that I presented to you. But like you can, in so many different ways, make this, make this your path too. It's about figuring out kind of what you're truly interested in. So whether it's grad school and professional school, like option 1, or 2, whether it's that more professionally oriented, post-bac, research oriented, professional development experience period, right? Or whether it's that completely, I'm going to get and do something kind of international or even domestic, but that's outside of my field. I think those are your three kind of avenues, right? But those are not the only three avenues. And once you get into there, everyone opens up different doors. So I think the best thing you can do is what you're doing right now, which is, okay, So I don't know what the roadmap looks like. So let me start to figure out like what does, the general path look like, and then overlay on top of that general path your more specific path. And then overlay on top of that something that's more specific for your discipline, and then start to navigate those. But you can see why a lot of students don't do this in their senior year, because it's a lot to take on to try to do that and line this all up, so that when you hit this graduation stage, in May, that you've got something lined up right then and there, because you still are considering the senior year is also like where you're still considering a lot of cool stuff. And to try to figure it out right now, it's really hard. And it's not a race at all. Now I will pull this other I'm going to pull this other, crazy COVID. I feel like I need a puppet, like a Muppet, to be like, here's COVID and here's how he's going to affect this, or she. Why am I personifying him as a dude? I don't know. But anyway, I feel like we do need to talk about the fact that a lot of graduate schools coming up into this next cycle are a little bit hesitant about what it looks like. I think we will find, particularly for the fall, which I don't believe will affect a large portion of you, that we will find a lot of graduate schools that may be looking the other way on GREs, that may be looking the other way on specific scores. I have heard from some med schools that for the next 3 years, they're not worrying about credit or no credit. Like they don't care. Because the MCAT and the GPA is so important to med school, that to have them already say that, I think is really important. And I think that that'll trickle down to other programs, that there will be a different allowance, because while Eckerd gives you the choice to decide whether you want credit or no credit, a lot of institutions are just saying this whole semester is pass fail, every class you're taking. And so med schools are trying to accommodate the largest population. I've also heard from some post-baccalaureate programs, and I was joking around in the beginning, I was talking to the NIH, the National Institutes of Health's institutional researcher and training program. Sorry. They are really aware that right now that they're probably not going to be accepting people until well into the fall. And it's a 6 to 9 month from applying process. And so if you applied for it in the May, if you were graduating, you may not get into it until like September. It would be way beyond that. It would probably be more November to January. And so there's going to be some timing that's going to change. So, and like right now, the Peace Corps, they're all suspended. Fulbright's accepting for next year, but all of the Fulbright right now has paused. So I think we are going to be still dealing with some of the residual of this as we go through this next academic year, 2021. But I think that we are going to have a better understanding of it in that like a year from now. I think you guys will be in a different space than you are now. But I think right now there is a lot of unknown. So I will acknowledge that. I want to let you know that if you do find something you're interested in and you're not sure, let me know. I'm happy to reach out to them. Most of the advisors for these programs have been really receptive about, like, for instance, Fulbright's like, yes, Kat, this is what's going on, but this is what we're planning. And so I think you can really start to think about in a different way kind of how that might fit in, even in this COVID craziness, right? The great pause. But it is going to affect. And I think it will affect, like if in 3 years you apply, this is going to be a semester or two on your schedule that you're going to see. And I think that that's going to come into bear. I think that's also going to come into bear with experiences and the expectations that you have. I have a high protein research. I have a high protein this. I have a high protein that. Well, I couldn't do anything because literally everything was closed, right? Or like socially isolated. So I think there's going to be some changes, and we just need to be a little bit nimble for those. But I've been meeting with the National Association of Fellowship Advisors, who also does a lot of graduate school and professional development. And we've been talking a lot about, like, how do we advise students? And what does that look like? So there's a lot of different communities talking about it. But be aware that as you're exploring these options, you know, it is going to be normal again. It may not be exactly the same as it was, but there's going to be a process and a return to this because humans love ontological and epistemological certainty. We crave it. We need it. We need structure and we need to know how we know. And the way that we get that is through our lovely academic institutions and these professional organizations. And so they will assert themselves at some point, just not right this moment. And so with that in mind, I just want to open up to any kind of questions, comments. As always, please feel free to reach out to me, appointments, contacts. You know, I'm pretty much this summer kind of just working in this space. I'm happy to meet with you. A lot of students, when they're applying to these programs or they're thinking about these paths, will set up weekly appointments, you know, or every other week or even monthly. And just we'll come in and just kind of say, what are you working on? Where are you, you know, what have you found? Like, and then we can set up other timelines depending on what you do. And as we're going right now, you guys have the benefit of time. So you can do a lot of really good exploring. We can do a lot of connecting, and we can start to put together a good plan or database or schedule, whatever you need. So questions, comments, concerns, observations? Good. So I think I really need the COVID pup. I need the COVID puppet. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I felt like it needed to come on stage. And so if by next Tuesday, there may be one. At that point, we won't quite give him a speaking role yet, but well, thank you guys so much for coming in. I'll send you, I'll have this recording. I'm working on getting the other recording out. It has been posted on the LibGuide, on Facebook and on the website, but I'll get these out to you guys too, so you can take a look at them again. Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much and have a great night. I'll see you guys soon.
Take care.
Okay.
Sorry, I was still in choir, but thanks.
That is okay. I've recorded it. I'll let you, like, you can go through it. And we'll talk a lot about it too, because I mean,
definitely.
Yeah, this is not like the end of your, like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going now. I'm done.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I guess I'll just spend the summer doing grad school research and working on my Fulbright application. So
well, and that's really what this is going to be. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse in a sense, because you're going to get. And the other thing too is you can start looking at like the NSF GRFP.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff like that you know in the past has been crammed into like you know. And so there is that, but like I really wanted it to be crammed into things because that. I know. Well, keep me posted. Shoot me an email. I'll send you some recordings. We'll keep in touch.
Sweet. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.